In a future where Earth teeters on the brink of annihilation due to an impending black hole, scientists are forced to take drastic measures to alter the very fabric of space-time in an attempt to save the planet. The story begins with Michael, a scientist, who recently shared in an interview that the general public remains unaware of the planet's dire fate. According to his research, Earth is on the cusp of total destruction. A collision with gamma rays is set to trigger a catastrophic chain reaction, leading to the end of Earth and humanity. These rays, emanating from black holes as they devour massive stars, release intense energy bursts once they reach the event horizon. Michael's studies show that Earth is about to cross paths with one of these black holes, bringing the planet directly into the path of a lethal gamma ray burst. The worst part is that humanity lacks the technology to stop it, and despite being aware of the threat, there's nothing they can do to prevent Earth's inevitable destruction. Meanwhile, another scientist named Control watches Michael's interview and becomes determined to find a way to save Earth from this fate. He believes the only hope lies in conducting an unprecedented experiment, but for this, he needs a suitable subject. Control analyzes the psychological profiles of Earth's population and narrows it down to 900 potential candidates. A covert team is assembled to collect and examine DNA samples from these individuals, eventually narrowing the selection until only one person remains, perfectly suited for Control's experiment. That person is Joe, an ordinary middle-aged security guard who has led a troubled life. In his youth, Joe struggled with alcoholism, which strained his relationships with his wife and children. After his wife's death, his two daughters grew distant, harboring resentment toward him. Control has begun closely monitoring Joe's every move, tracking his daily activities, and reviewing his medical records. He is fully aware of Joe's troubled mental state, which combined with his difficult personal circumstances makes him the perfect candidate for Control's project. Joe's life has been filled with hardship, and his unstable mental health has drawn Control's interest. Meanwhile, Joe's older daughter, Zoe, lives on her own and is studying to become a doctor. She is in a relationship with Michael, the scientist who had first warned the public about the impending disaster in his interview. On the other hand, Joe's younger daughter, Rhea, has fallen into a deep addiction to drugs. In exchange for the drugs, her boyfriend regularly abuses her. One day, Joe visits his doctor to share some surprising news. After a year of sobriety, he's landed a front desk job at a prestigious company. He's overjoyed even though he never interviewed for the position, and is thrilled by the prospect of earning a stable income. Unbeknownst to him, Control is behind this opportunity, manipulating the circumstances. Joe, however, sees this as a chance to win back his daughter's affection, believing that with the new job and money, he can finally make amends. Eager to prove himself to Zoe, he buys her an expensive gift, hoping it will help repair their strained relationship. But despite his efforts, Zoe remains resentful, still unwilling to forgive him. Joe, frustrated, continues to shower her with gifts, but this only pushes her further away. As Zoe grows more upset, Michael intervenes, telling Joe to stay away from his daughter. A confrontation ensues, and Joe's relationship with Zoe deteriorates further. Michael, who is everything to Zoe and always takes care of her, is her rock, while Joe feels increasingly worthless and detached from his life. As the year progresses, Joe, feeling utterly defeated, considers returning to drinking. However, before he can follow through, someone attacks him from behind as he sits in his car. It's revealed that Control orchestrated this attack. The assailant knocks Joe unconscious, and Control's team transports him to their laboratory. There, the first phase of the experiment begins. Control implants a device into Joe's eye, designed to enhance his senses. From that moment on, Control can monitor everything Joe sees and hears, making him an unwilling pawn in a plan that could change the course of history. Joe wakes up the next morning on a deserted street, disoriented, as he recalls the events of the previous night. Nearby, he notices a box with a video of himself playing. When he opens the box, he finds a gun inside, which leaves him bewildered. Just then, he hears Control's voice through the chip implanted in his brain. Control explains that the device in Joe's eyes allows him not only to communicate directly with him, but also to hear everything Joe sees and says. Additionally, Control can show him any video he wants. Control demands that Joe comply with his every command. He goes on to remind Joe of the harm he's caused to his daughters, one a drug addict and the other unforgiving and distant. Joe, overwhelmed with guilt, breaks down, begging Control to let him go. As Joe pleads, an unfamiliar woman approaches, visibly concerned about him. He quickly asks her to call the police, but Control intervenes, instructing him to kill her using the gun in the box. If Joe refuses, Control threatens to kill both of his daughters. To prove his power, Control shows Joe footage of his daughters in danger. Reluctantly, Joe fires the gun at the woman, but the gun doesn't shoot. It turns out the woman is part of the experiment and has been working with Control. She knocks Joe unconscious once again. Joe later regains consciousness in the trunk of his car, confused and trying to contact the police. However, Control warns him that if he tries to reach out for help again, his daughters will be killed. Control reaffirms that Joe must obey every command from now on. In fear for his daughters' lives, Joe finally agrees to follow orders. He's released and given his first task to go to the home of Charles, the boss of the new company, and steal his laptop. Following Control's orders, Joe forces his way into Charles's home at gunpoint and demands that he retrieve the laptop from his cupboard. Once Charles opens the laptop, Joe provides a DNA sample. To his astonishment, the results reveal a perfect match, and Control expresses immense satisfaction, confirming that Joe is now the ideal candidate for their next phase of experiments. However, when Control commands Joe to kill Charles and bring him the laptop, Joe refuses. He cannot bring himself to kill anyone. Charles, sensing Joe's hesitation, seizes the opportunity, attacking Joe and attempting to flee, but Control acts swiftly, sending a drone to take Charles down, killing him instantly. Next, Control demands Charles's fingerprints, and despite his reluctance, Joe cuts off Charles's fingers. Reluctantly, he follows the next command to head to the research facility. There, as instructed by Control, Joe puts on a mask and releases a toxic gas into the lab, killing all the staff inside. Overwhelmed by the sight of so many dead bodies, Joe is shocked, but Control reassures him, explaining that such sacrifices are necessary for the greater good, to save the Earth. With the fingerprints now in hand, Joe makes his way to the lab's main control room. Inside, he discovers a massive glass machine. Control tells him that this is his final task, and upon completing it, they will free his daughters. Joe, though reluctant, enters the chamber, bracing for whatever comes next. All the doors in the chamber locked behind Joe as Control initiated the final experiment. Intense waves of electromagnetic energy surged through Joe, causing excruciating pain as his DNA began to mutate. Joe screamed in agony, but Control reassured him, claiming that this was a gift, a way to empower him to save the Earth. As the waves continued, Joe's body started changing at the subatomic level, the transformation pushing him to his physical and mental limits. Finally, the experiment culminated in a massive explosion, obliterating the entire lab and the surrounding area. The blast wiped out everyone in the vicinity, and news of the destruction quickly spread. The police launched an investigation into the explosion, while Zoe, watching the news, began crying when she saw the reports about the blast at her father's company. She feared the worst, thinking her father had perished in the explosion. Meanwhile, Joe found himself back at home, angry and confused about why Control had subjected him to such brutal experiments. As he processed what had happened, he realized that his body now contained an unfathomable amount of energy. It was as if his energy had become concentrated in the same way a black hole contains mass and power within a small space. His body had become so dense with energy that he may now be the most powerful person on Earth. Control, aware of Joe's transformation, instructed him to let his emotions flow, believing that doing so would allow Joe to further enhance his powers. For their mission to succeed, Joe's abilities needed to grow, and Control was prepared to do whatever it took to ensure that happened, no matter the cost. Joe's next mission took him to a man named Nico, the very same person who had drugged and abused his daughter Rhea, along with many other girls. Upon arriving at Nico's location, Joe discovered Nico intoxicated and filming videos of girls. Joe, disturbed by what he saw, confronted him, demanding to know why he was committing such heinous acts. Nico, thinking Joe was just a middle-aged man and Rhea's father, decided to taunt him. He played a video for Joe, one in which he was physically abusing Joe's own daughter. What Nico didn't realize, however, was that Joe was no longer just an ordinary man. Upon watching the video, something inside Joe snapped. His emotions, already heightened, caused his power to surge uncontrollably, and his body began to take on a humanoid form. Control, watching from afar, was pleased. Joe's emotions were the key to unlocking his true potential. Fueled by rage, Joe unleashed an enormous explosion in the building, obliterating everything in his path. Nico, the other girls, and many innocent people in the vicinity were killed, all in the name of saving Earth. Outside, police officers arrived at the scene, ready to arrest Joe for his involvement in the recent explosions. Joe, now fully aware of his powers, warned them to stay away, declaring that he was far more dangerous than they could comprehend. Nevertheless, they arrested him and took him to the police station. While in custody, Control communicated with Joe and instructed him to warn the police about a massive bomb planted in the city's shipyard, set to explode soon. The bomb was capable of killing over 20,000 people, and the authorities quickly mobilized to stop it. But as Joe heard this, he realized that he had to prevent the explosion himself. Even while restrained, he was released from the energy beam controlling him. Seizing the opportunity, he took control of a police car and raced toward the shipyard. Control provided him with the bomb's exact location, but Joe quickly realized that getting there by car was impossible in time. So Joe made a drastic decision. He transformed into a beam of energy and shot through the city at an incredible speed. As he sped through, he tore through buildings, causing destruction and loss of life along the way. But Joe was indifferent to the casualties, focused solely on stopping the bomb. Finally reaching the bomb, Joe used his newfound abilities to lift it, along with the entire building it was in, into space, preventing the blast from damaging the city below. However, the debris from the building collided with a plane in midair, sending it plummeting toward the earth. Realizing the danger, Joe, now fully aware of his strength, managed to redirect the plane, guiding it to the ground in a controlled descent. While the plane crashed, Joe's intervention saved countless lives and spared the city from further devastation. At the same time, Joe was preventing a train from falling off a broken track, a result of his earlier mistake. Meanwhile, Zoe watched in disbelief on TV as her father's actions played out, unable to comprehend the transformation he had undergone. Just as she was trying to process what was happening, a group of people stormed into her house and kidnapped her, along with Michael, taking them both away. When Joe arrived at his daughter's house, he found it empty. Control then showed him a video of Zoe and Michael, revealing that they planned to kill both of them soon. This was all part of Control's plan to further enhance Joe's powers by using his emotions. Joe, however, had now fully recognized the extent of his abilities. Determined to take control of his own fate, he touched the laptop in the room and hacked into all of Control's systems. He declared that he was no longer under their control. He was everywhere. As a being of pure energy, he could now move through any signal and reach his daughter in an instant. Within seconds, Joe reached Zoe, where he formed a protective shield around her and Michael. As he did, the entire facility began to implode, and Control's people were killed in the ensuing destruction. Control watched, satisfied, knowing Joe was becoming exactly what he wanted. However, he still had one final move to play. Joe embraced Zoe, apologizing for leaving her all these years, promising that nothing would ever harm her again. Zoe, overwhelmed with emotion, forgave him, and the two shared a moment of happiness, finally reunited after so much time apart. But just as they began to savor their reunion, the greatest twist of all unfolded. From behind them, Michael spoke, his voice filled with regret. He apologized, but explained that Joe would have to make one final sacrifice to save the world. As the gamma rays neared Earth, Michael, having been part of the plan from the very beginning, shot Joe's daughter, Zoe, killing her in front of him. Michael had knowingly formed a relationship with her to manipulate Joe emotionally, ensuring that Joe would be devastated when she was killed. Although Michael knew he would also perish in the process, he chose to make this sacrifice for the greater good, believing it was necessary to save the Earth. His actions, cruel as they were part of the larger strategy to push Joe to his breaking point and unlock his full potential. In a fit of rage, Joe killed Michael, but Control, ever manipulative, showed Joe another devastating blow. His other daughter, Rhea, had also been killed by Control's men. With nothing left to live for, Joe's grief overwhelmed him, and he began to lose control over his energy. He dissolved into the atmosphere, becoming one with the Earth's space-time, able to exist everywhere at once. In this state, he began torturing and killing Control, who, despite his impending death, proclaimed that humanity would forever remember the sacrifice he made for the planet. Control, too, met his end. Now a universal energy, Joe dissolved into every particle of the universe. His consciousness spread throughout, ensuring the Earth's protection forever. As the deadly gamma rays approached, ready to destroy Earth, Joe recalled the promise he made to his family. He would always keep them safe. Joe absorbed the gamma rays, taking them into himself to prevent the destruction of the planet. In doing so, Joe was no longer human, but pure energy, dissolving into the Earth and becoming its eternal guardian. Control and Michael, while they caused immense suffering and sacrifice, were not evil. They understood that to push Joe to his limits and awaken his true powers, they needed to create intense emotional pain, even if it meant losing their lives and many others in the process. Their actions, though morally questionable, were done with the belief that they were saving their planet. In the end, Joe's transformation into a force of universal energy saved the Earth, but at the cost of his humanity. The story concludes with a powerful and bittersweet ending, leaving us to ponder whether the ends truly justified the means. What do you think? Were Control and Michael's actions morally justified, or did their choices cross a line for the sake of saving the planet? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling sci-fi stories. Thank you.